Hey, Mark. Mark? You might have to unmute your mic. Mark, can you hear me? Ah, there you are. Mark? I can.
Hey.
Yeah, okay. I thought we were having maybe a little audio problem at first. Okay.
Oh, it made me update the software and all that too.
Oh, okay. So where do you want to begin here? Do you want to begin at the top on these equations, or are you pretty good with those?
The top works, yeah. This is the first time we've talked about this stuff since like last year, so.
Okay. Let's do the top. Let's see if I can figure out how to do this. I'm getting a little bit better. So if I'm talking the equation y plus 3 equals 1/3 x plus minus 6, what's the first thing we have to do in order to be able to graph that easily?
Find the intercepts.
Well, we need to put it into y equals mx plus b. Oops.
Okay.
Hold on a moment. Well, I got enough of it written over there for the moment that I can handle this. So if we're trying to put it into y equal mx plus b, what do we need to do to this thing?
You need to move the 3 to the other side of the equal sign.
First, or do we have to do something else first?
Well, 1/3 is the slope, correct?
Okay, no, I got no problem with what you're doing there. No, 1/3 isn't the slope yet. Actually, it is the slope, but we don't know it yet because we don't have it in y equal mx plus b format. Okay? Once we get it into y equal mx plus b format, then we'll know what m is. So let's, because you might know what the slope is, but at this point you don't know what the y-intercept. You don't know what b is. So we have to keep going. What do I have to do on the right side of this equation?
Do you have to somehow get rid of the parentheses?
Okay, good. What am I left with?
Y equals 1/3. Is it just 6 minus 3?
Well, let's tackle on the x first. In other words, I have to multiply this 1/3 by both the x and the minus 6.
Okay, so 1/3 x minus 2.
Plus the minus 3.
Yeah.
Okay. In other words, that's why I prefer to distribute first before I move the 3 over. It's less confusing. Okay. Either way, you get the same answer, which is that. Now we have it in precise y equal mx plus b format. What's the y-intercept?
-5.
And what's the slope?
1/3.
So how do I draw the line?
1/3 is going down, isn't it?
Doesn't really matter.
No, it's a slow.
There's no correct way to go. What you want to make sure is that you end up with a positive slope. So if you have to go down on your first move, you want to go left on your next move. But you could also go up on your first move and go right on your next move. So is it up 1 and right 3, or is it up 3 and right 1?
Up 1 and right 3.
Correct. So there's the slope. Now I just connect those, and that's my line. Okay. All right. Now, how do I get this thing back? I'm going to get this thing yet. Okay, and let's see. It does seem terribly, hold on. Get a new page so we can do a new question. And now I got to move. Must be an easier way to do this. I must not be doing something right. The biggest problem I've had is getting two things on one page. Okay, since we're going to have limited time, I'm going to assume you know how to do E, since it's pretty similar to D.
Yeah, I can work with that.
Same way with F. So let's jump to 6. And let me write it over here. We have y is less than -1/4 x plus 6. So what's the difference between graphing equalities and graphing inequalities?
I'm not sure.
Well, not a lot. In other words, you kind of initially start off graphing it as an inequality, or as an equality. But instead of a solid line, I'm going to use a dotted line because of that less than. So pretend you're graphing it as y equals -1/4 x plus 6. Tell me how to graph that. Where do you always start?
Hold on.
You're graphing linear equations.
Do we want to make it y equals mx plus b?
It's already in that.
Okay.
We don't have
so the slope is...
Well, let's start with a point. Before we start with the slope, let's start with a point, and then we can work the slope off of that point. So what's the one point we know?
6, 0.
0, 6. There is a difference. In other words, this right here is B. And that's the y-intercept. So y-intercepts are always going to be 0, something. Okay? Now we can figure out where our line goes. So what do I do next to incorporate this slope of -1/4?
You could use the point and go in reverse, I guess, and
tell me what to do.
Find just plot the line.
Pardon? In other words, this is where I'm at right now. I'm at 6. I know that point is on my curve. Okay?
Okay.
What next? I gotta draw the whole line.
You could go down 1 and over 4 to continue the slope line.
Okay. But is it down 1 and to the right 4 or down 1 and to the left 4? Because down 1 and over 4 doesn't really tell me.
Down 1 and to the left.
Okay, if I go down 1 and to the left, what kind of slope am I going to have on that line?
Oh, that's positive, so it'd be down 1 and to the right.
Okay. And that's the best way to deal with that, is just do it however way you think is correct, and then correct it if it's the wrong slope. Now, because I have, hold on, because it's not an equality, and it's an inequality, I have to make this either a solid line or a dotted line. Well, I make it a dotted line because it's less than only. If it was less than or equal like that, I'd make it a solid line. But it's less than. In other words, the next problem is y is greater than or equal. That's going to be a solid line. Okay? So, not done with this problem yet, because as all I did was graph the boundary. I still have to choose which side of that line to shade. Which side should I choose?
If it's less than, then you're doing the bottom half, correct?
Correct. And you don't really care about the orientation of that line. What you care about is finding a point that's less than that line on the y-axis. In other words, I want you to focus only on the y-axis here. Ignore the x-axis. So if I find a point that's less than that on the y-axis, that tells me the side of the inequality that I need to be on. Okay? And now it's everywhere there. That's that thing graphed properly. Okay. Hold on. Must be another one. I got to work on this program here to understand it a little bit better. Why does this keep again, B is very much like A. On B, what's the y-intercept?
That's just 1, correct?
Plus 1, correct. What is the slope? What's M?
Down 1 and to the right 1.
Correct. The slope is minus 1. Okay. And then is the line solid or dotted?
Dotted.
Okay. So I start there. No, it's solid because it's greater than or equal.
Oh, okay. But the top part is shaded, isn't it?
Correct. In other words, I just look to the y-axis only. I find a point above the line. Any point would suffice, and that tells me which side to shade. Okay?
Okay.
And we probably should do C, only because they gave it to us in a little different format. C is x minus 3y is greater than 6. Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah.
X minus 3y is greater than 6. Okay, we need to put this, hold on a second. That's much better for me. So how do I put this in y equals mx plus b format? Because that's still the first step. Whether it's an equality or an inequality.
You could subtract x onto the other side of the equality.
Okay, what's the next line? Tell me.
Then you could add 3
Hold it. Let's do it one step at a time.
on both sides.
Let's do it one step at a time. If I'm going to subtract x from the left side and the right side, what's the next line?
Oh, that'd be negative 3y is greater than 6 minus x.
Okay. And what's the next line?
We could add 3 to both sides, so it'd be y is greater than 6 minus...
Hold on. When you are solving equations and you are trying to isolate a variable like y, you do the opposite of whatever anything that's accompanying it is doing. What is that minus 3 doing to y? Is it adding?
Adding.
It's
on both sides.
It's multiplying, is it not?
Oh.
So, what do we have to do to get...
All right.
How do you get rid of something that's multiplying?
Divide.
Correct. I'm going to divide both sides by minus 3. Now, because this is an inequality, the most important difference between solving inequalities and equations is that if you have to multiply or divide by a negative number, you have to change the direction of the sign, the inequality sign. Okay? Now, I didn't on the first step. I merely subtracted x. I didn't divide by any negative numbers or multiply by negative numbers. But on this step, I'm dividing by a negative 3. So I end up with y, but now I change the direction of the sign. And what's that equal to?
Y is less than 6. Oh, that.
Split that into 2 fractions.
Is that just... Wait, what?
Split this into 2 fractions. In other words, you've got that part of the fraction, and you've got this part of the fraction. So split it up.
Okay.
What does it become?
6 divided by negative 3 would be negative 2.
Okay.
And then, would it be negative 1/3 x?
It's a negative? What's a negative divided by a negative? In other words, this,
Sorry, what was that?
This is the second part of the fraction. I got negative x divided by negative 3. That becomes a positive 1/3 x.
Okay, okay.
You see why?
Yeah.
In other words, I've got negative x divided by negative 3. Well, negative divided by negative is positive, so I got x over 3, and that's the same thing as 1/3 x. Okay? Now, what's wrong with the way I've written this bottom expression here? Is it in y equals mx plus b format?
No.
Okay, so what do I need to do?
Can't you just flip the 1/3 x and the negative 2 so it's y is less than 1/3 x minus 2?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. And now I'm ready to graph it. Where do I start?
You're going to start at negative 2.
Okay. What next?
And then you're going to go up 1 and to the right 3.
Okay.
For your slope.
And that's a positive slope. Is that a solid line or a dotted line?
That's a dotted line. and you're shading the bottom half.
Correct. Easiest way on the shading is just to always, in other words, these are relatively easy for shading, but I'll give you one that's not quite as easy. That's a straight line, okay? And what that is y is less than, that's a pretty big slope. I'm going to call that 100 slope. X, looks like it goes through -1. So which side of that line, that straight wiggly line there, would you shade?
The left side of it.
Correct. Which is technically the bottom side of it. In other words, it looks like this is a problem where it's left and right. And that's why I say always look only to the y-axis. Do not consider this left and right. You wouldn't want to answer that to the left of it. If the teacher asked you, you'd say below the line. So all I got to do is go find out where the line crosses the y-axis. It's any point below that line, and that ends up being that side of the line.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. It's starting to work out, I think. Yeah. I really do not like Windows 10. Even though I'm getting more used to it, I don't really care for it. For what I'm doing. Let's see. We only have 2 minutes. That's funny. They gave the wrong time on that other one. Let's do F with our last 2 minutes.
Okay.
Minus y plus 2 is less than minus x.
How are we going to make that y positive?
Well, let's first of all get it isolated. That's what'll...
Okay.
So what's the first step?
Subtract 2 on each side.
Okay. In other words, that's almost always the first step, is to get rid of anything that's being added or subtracted to it. Now we're almost there. What do I have to do to the left side to get it to be y?
Multiply it by itself?
No. There's a couple of things you could do. I could add 2y, right?
Yeah.
In other words, if I added 2y, I've got y is less than minus x minus 2 plus 2y. What is wrong with that as an answer? I got y's on both sides of the inequality. You can't have that. That's not solving for y.
Yeah.
Okay? So that's not an option. That does not allow me to solve for y. What does? What can I do to this thing? To get just y. What do I have to do to get just y? What's currently
multiplied by -1?
Correct. Or I would probably say divide by -1. Okay, so read me the next line.
So y is less than -x minus 2 over...
Hold on. Remember the rule? What's the difference between inequalities and equations? If you divide by a negative number, you have...
the sign flips.
Very important. There's no way you're getting the right answer without doing that. Now, what does that become?
Y is more than x plus 2.
Correct. And that's pretty easy to graph. Start with 2, go up 1, to the right 1, dotted or straight line? Mark, dotted or straight line?
It's going to be dotted.
With a slope of 1. Which side do I shade?
The right side.
Say above or below.
Above.
Is that the right side?
Yeah.
No. You got it's above, but it's not the right side. Had I taken literally, I would have assumed this was the right side. And so what I'd like to see is that you not say right or left ever. It's always up or down, because that's what it is.
Okay.
Y is almost always on the left, so we're only considering the y-axis. And since it's greater than, we merely have to find a point on the y-axis that's above that line, and that tells us which side to shade.
Okay.
Even though right and left can give you the right directions, it's not the way you should think, and it will only lead to confusion. In other words, when we had one that looked like this, you don't want to say right, even though right is correct. What you want to say is above. Merely finding a point that's above where it crosses, and that means this side here if it was greater than. But if you start thinking in terms of right and left, it's going to lead you astray. Okay? All right. I unfortunately have to I have a 5:15 that I got to get to, and I got to drive there.
Okay.
But that was good. It sounds like you're probably done with new geometry stuff, and that you're going to review algebra for a while.
Yeah.
Which is good. You need to do that. All geometry students, after being away from algebra for a full year, you want to review some of this stuff. That's the way to do it. All right. Mark, I will talk to you on Thursday. Well, this went as smooth as any session I've had go. So I guess I'm making a little bit of progress.